It's time, I'm sure, for a Feldman vacation. So go up to Nantucket, find the man who can suck it. You better do it now before you kick the bucket. You better do it now before you kick the bucket. You better do it now before you kick the bucket.
Thank you so much, Professor Mike Steinel. Great lesson in comedy. The Nantucket joke that he saves to the end, the fact that the song is so clean and stylized that when he says, find a man who can suck it, makes it even funnier. That's why had he done anything before that was blue, it would have undercut the power of going up to Nantucket to find a man who can suck it. Joining us is Professor Harvey J. Kaye, author of many books, including Take Hold of Our History and FDR and Democracy. Alan Minsky is executive director of Progressive Democrats of America. I apologize for keeping everybody waiting. Welcome. What is on your mind, Professor Kaye?
Okay, so the infrastructure bills are clearly on my mind, and I've been listening to the conversation. I worry that they'll have passed this one. Pelosi's going to end up moving the other one, except the moderate, the centrist Democrats, a crew of them, said they won't vote in favor of the 3.5 trillion, which really, I don't know. The Democrats, they're so, I don't know what the story is with them. I've been also worried. That's the first thing. I mean, that's the thing that's on my mind. The second thing on my mind is that even with all this stuff, I'm absolutely convinced that the Republicans must be celebrating right now because, they're going to get the money into their states from the infrastructure plan. They need it desperately in the same way Manchin does, McConnell does. But at the same time, think about the fact that all of this talk of infrastructure plans, which should have been passed months ago, right? Should have been passed, is basically obscuring voting rights, workers' rights. And I think they're probably happy. They're celebrating, What do they care?
Alan Minsky, executive director of Progressive Democrats of America. Voting rights. Manchin has signed on to something like S1. It's not really S1 anymore. And so are we going to see a voters' rights bill passed in the Senate? Will it be folded in to the infrastructure, the reconciliation bill? Mark Savasco from Congressman Ted Lieu's office says they're not thinking about that, but it's been suggested you can do it through reconciliation because the federal government spends billions on voting. So what are your thoughts on S1?
Well, first, let me say I actually really appreciated Professor Adnan Hussein's comments about the lack of seriousness. I would extend it past the progressive left, I think, to the totality of American society. But the progressive left, yes, too. It's not a political formation. Everybody who's except for very old people right now have never seen something that's could honestly be called a left in a governing position in the United States of America.
Right.
So none of us have lived through seeing the left win. That, I think, is at the heart of why it's an immature political movement, not poised to try to, do what's necessary to pass through its agenda. There's a lot to what could be said about that, but I really, really appreciated his comments. And of course,
I didn't pick up on it because I promised the audience at the beginning of the show that we would tell you what's in the infrastructure bill and not focus on the internecine quarrels on the left. I have an algorithm.
But the internecine struggles on the left.
Let me ask you my question first. Because there's an algorithm. So YouTube is sending me certain types of videos. I'm in a silo, and I subscribe to more and more leftist podcasts. I can't tell if it's I who wants to see this stuff or whether or not it's only what the left is talking about. But there seems to be a lot of fighting on the left right now.
Old friends of ours.
Now, is that because of the algorithm? Is that because I'm given stuff that I want to see? Is the rest of the Democratic Party seeing this?
No, it's interesting to think that, did the algorithm, sort of like, make sure the cream was curdled in Jimmy's coffee one morning, and that's why he got upset so much, and then it all started from there. Did it come from the anger-making algorithm? No. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really want to comment on the infighting in the left. I think it's just going in all these different directions.
They're infighting. According to my algorithm, the most important conversation is Jimmy Dore versus the Young Turks.
Yeah.
I refuse to believe that is on everybody's homepage when they go to YouTube. Professor Harvey J.K.
No, it's not. It's not. It's only on YouTube.
You're not. The first thing that comes up isn't Cenk versus Jimmy and Anna versus Stephanie, right?
Not on mine.
Yeah, there is a whole.
Because you clicked on it 7 times, David, or 8 times.
Of course, I'm going to watch it.
In fact, I have to say that I thought this was passé already. I thought that was over. But
there's a cottage industry that has sprung up of young, really smart vloggers who are commenting on Jimmy and Cenk. I'm going, what has God wrought here? This is.
I guess when you become utterly irrelevant, that's about as best you can do. That's what this. I love the way people throw around the left as a term. Okay, nowadays.
That's very disturbing. Yeah,
it's absolutely hysterical to think that Jimmy Dore has any place, or for that matter, any of us have any. I mean, there's no left. Where the hell is the left? Okay.
What is the left?
I don't quite agree with that. But I agree that what's also happened in the left class.
By the way, Alan Minsky is responsible for Jimmy Dore. No, seriously.
You know what? He says he didn't agree. That I may have gone too far. I'm just trying to save him from the persecution you and I are prepared to give him.
Jimmy, it's true. Jimmy Dore show launched with my green light. Sean Heikemper is general manager at KPFK. We gave Jimmy his first platform, and that's where I believe the proper form of the Jimmy Dore show launched.
Yes.
And that was before I met you, David. And by the way, he was a totally like milquetoast MSNBC liberal at that point. He's mainly making like John Boehner jokes, and was very much, very much defending the mainstream of the Democratic Party against Republican attacks was the crux of his politics. They went a little bit further, but he definitely moved to the left not long after, because I think Occupy had a big radicalizing effect on his the way he leads.
Let me talk about the economics of this, because I've gotten a taste of the trajectory that Jimmy has gone on, and that is you start watching Fox News, you start watching the right, and you cannot believe these imbeciles, and you have to comment on it. Well, I worked on The Daily Show. That John built an entire business on, can you believe that Sean Hannity said this? And at some point, and this was, I think it was before Barack Obama was even president, I remember thinking, all right, I can't watch Fox News. These people, they're charlatans. It's a scam. They prey on innocent ignoramuses. Of course they're going to say this. It's wrestling. I'm not going to dignify it. I'm not going to watch it. And So I let it go. And then Professor Ben Burgess, Michael Brooks, a couple of people said to me, you got to watch this stuff. You got to read Glenn Beck. You got to know what the other side is saying, because where does critical race theory come from? How is this now? And transgender bathroom. If you're not listening to Mark Levin and Michael Savage and Sean Hannity and Fox, and you don't know what you're up against. So I started watching it, and I went ballistic. And I've been clipping things that have been sent to me and putting them on the show. And I'm falling into the trap of, can you believe Tucker Carlson said that? The economics of it, and I think this is what happened with Jimmy, is, well, everybody on our side is attacking Tucker Carlson. It's prosaic now. I got it. I'll just focus on the Democrats. That will be my fresh hot take, is everybody's going after the Republicans. My unique take is it's the Democrats who are the real problem. The Democrats are responsible for the Republicans getting away with this. And I'll just keep poking at the Democrats, because that is something you won't see on CNN, you won't see on MSNBC, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
But then
I also find Jimmy to be, and I suppose his the manager who oversaw the production of the show for 9 years. I do think Jimmy is a sincere,
great show.
He was also a sincere advocate for the working class, and he sees what is true in American society, that the working class, poor and working class people are just screwed over and over and over and over again. Everybody accepts it. Nobody says shit about it. Yeah,
but it is what I see, what I hear and see is it is borderline Trumpian. It's Huey Long. He's maybe Professor Harvey J. Kaye can teach us about Huey Long and Father Coughlin, that kind of populism that is on the wrong side of that coin. Right? I mean, anybody?
Yeah, look, Alan will think me a broken record because we do this all. He hears me say this in every venue. No labor movement, no left. It's as simple as that. You can talk all you want about somebody's concern for the working class. Oh, BS. If you're not pushing labor, you're not going anywhere. That's the way it works. You can't talk about a period in American history where the left advanced when it wasn't the labor movement that was making the push alongside of civil rights. In some cases, civil rights depended on the lobbying of labor for so much of. Look, back in the 60s, every single major force began with support coming out of the UAW and the industrial sector of labor. Walter Reuther. Okay. March on Washington was underwritten by the UAW. The National Organization for Women was originally underwritten by the UAW. Port Huron was a UAW retreat. I mean, so if
Tom Hayden?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Students, yeah.
What do you mean?
Where they met, the center where they met was basically I believe a UAW retreat. I don't want to call it a resort, but it was a retreat. And over and over again, just look this is all laid out in my book, The Fight for the Four Freedoms. In the 60s, the degree to which every one of the social movements depended upon labor, and nothing passed without labor making it happen. That's the case. Okay. And it was an arrangement between Lyndon Johnson and George Meany and Walter Reuther. There was a list. These are the things we're going to get enacted. Yeah. And I'm not saying other forces weren't involved. Of course they were. But labor deferred over and over again to some of these things, and they happened. Okay.
Yeah, and labor. Okay. Now this goes back to a point I was trying to make about 8 minutes ago or so. The maturity of the left extends past this, the media, YouTube people, yelling at each other. The population of the people who vote Democrat, including most of whom support more progressive public policies, they're not serious about, even watching what's happening in front of them. I mean, the fact that partisan gerrymandering is going to be allowed to go forward because they don't have their schedule together to get a vote. Organized labor in the 50s and 60s wouldn't have let that happen. Okay. And there's no force like that in the United States of America. Right now. So there's just a concrete example of what Harvey's talking about. Also, the other thing is the Democratic Party will do these things with the infrastructure bill, and they won't go out. Joe Biden won't go out. No, none of these like neoliberal, moderate careerist Democrats are going to go out and make clear to the population what this means to their benefit. There's nobody going to champion it like Roosevelt did with the fireside chats and with what labor did again, just structurally in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, because they're in neighborhoods, they exist, they forge working class solidarity among the people who are members. And that's why you had the Democratic Party held the House of Representatives all the way until the Gingrich 94 thing. There were a few breaks, in the Republican wins after World War II years. But for the most part, all the way through that whole period, the Democratic Party held the House of Representatives.
46 was the only time they took advantage of the post-war chaos and the Truman presidency, which was rudderless in some ways because they didn't know. Truman couldn't figure out if he was going to go with labor or against labor.
Richard
Go ahead.
Trumka, head of the AFL-CIO, died from a heart attack last week, 72. Thoughts?
Look, we need, there's something that's spoken about right now, which is just dismissed with a shrug by members of the labor union, especially in building trades and the oil and gas workers, which is the term just transition. It's a central term in American political discourse. If you take the actual politics and social organization of the society seriously, again, I don't know that many people do. They follow horse races in politics and things like that, horse races and big bills when they go through Congress, but seriously looking at the society. What's that about? The labor unions are not happy about the idea of a transition to a green economy if it means you're going to have no more unionized jobs in all of these previously unionized spaces of work. It's going to take a serious effort to find a way to create jobs that produce the necessary components of a green energy system and to make sure those are unionized. And so I see Professor Hussein is asking about the future for organized labor. That's a big one right there. And we really, really, really need to figure out how to do that because it is a barrier to us continuing to burn ourselves off the planet right now.
Everybody should go to paydayreport.com. Mike Elk, who unionized Politico. He tried to unionize Politico and he got fired and he took the money and set up Payday Report. The Labor Department, I was reading, I don't know where I read this. Our Labor Department says last year was a record for the lowest number of strikes in America. And apparently they're not going to Payday Report. They have a strike tracker that has become the Bible for the labor movement. There are actions going on all over America. Everybody should go to Payday Report. And there are strikes happening all over America. I'm looking at the map right now.
Look, and the mainstream, the major media are they're ignoring all this stuff.
Right.
But that's also why these folks who posture as if they're on the left, how much attention does Jimmy Dore give to these things?
I don't want to.
No, I'm not dwelling on Dore. I'm just using him as a primary example. That's all.
I don't know. How much do I give to that? I don't give enough.
You actually, you don't, and yet you do. You were ahead of the ball on head of the game on what was that? No evil foods.
Right.
To your
Yes.
credit, no, seriously. Now there's articles that are showing up in places for this. I think the American Prospect did a major
Right.
piece on them. This is like, what is that? A year after God, it's got to be more than a year. 15 months ago when we did it on
My
Office
listeners.
Hours.
I mean, somebody sent me, some article or something about this couple, these fake leftists, but I don't do enough covering the labor movement. I've tried to get Mike Elk on the show, but he puts me off because my show, is not big enough. But I would love to cover labor to the exclusion of everything else because it is the third rail of business. It is the third rail of radio and television. There was a time when we had labor reporters on the news, and they will not cover labor. Rachel Maddow ain't going to cover the labor movement because
Yeah, right.
MSNBC ain't union.
There are two platforms in the new prominent left podcasts and YouTube shows that do a lot of it. Smaller audience is Jacobin. They definitely are focused on labor. And then Crystal Ball, say what you like about Crystal Ball on this or that issue. She definitely does get in some kind of flame wars back and forth with some people, but she has been very good about elevating labor compared to not just the mainstream media, but the whole other list of the prominent,
Right.
Like more than the Young Turks. And I'm not trying to disparage anybody here, but yeah, definitely more than I see.
There are flame wars on the left, but we see that on the right too, right? And Professor Case said, "Stop calling it the left." What is the left? The left.
We can call it the left. Look, I thought a year ago, 2 years ago, I thought that all of these YouTube shows that had emerged out of podcasts, and I actually envisioned a significant new left media, but the new left media has become the
huge problem is they have no resources for investigative journalism. So already it's an incredibly impoverished form of what has been, say what you will about objective media, corporate controlled media. Investigative journalism was, of course, a part of a corporate controlled media, but it's going to be sorely missed. Might not have been perfect, but it's better than anything we got.
Well, I mean, you've got these groups, these things that have emerged, but you're right. The resources are limited.
Oh, so much less of it going on. Just on bulk, it's diminished phenomenally.
Look, I don't want to say anything bad about Young Turks because they're my friends, but they are friends. But it is the case that to watch them nowadays it doesn't even have the punch it used to have.
The left, by the way, look, Bernie was pretty classical left. If left has ever meant anything, obviously the term comes from the French Revolution. There, it didn't really have a strong economic component, though it was tacitly true that it would have. It was about having more representation for more people within the political process, coming off previously an absolute monarchy, right? That's where the term comes from. The groups that wanted more broad public support were sitting on the left. Okay, that very rapidly got extended to economic power as an analog to political power, and the two go hand in hand. So the left wants as much political power and economic power for as many people possible, the right less so. And that's the definition of the term. And I think Bernie's a fine leftist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with that.
Yeah. Well, right now the progressive movement is built off of the two Sanders campaigns. And all of
the two, I didn't hear you.
They're built off of the two Sanders campaigns. It remains the template
right.
for the
Oh, absolutely.
public. Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of ego at play, I've noticed.
But not from Bernie Sanders, notice too, David, right? Just to say.
Not from Bernie, no.
Not me, us was Bernie Sanders, the absolute antithesis.
But I've noticed a lot of Bernie supporters, pundits who their ego is out in front first, and not the needs of the working class. It's human nature, as Dr. Hirschenfeld would say. But Professor K, you're right. If you're not talking about labor, you're just making noise. You're filling time. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. And it is the third rail of broadcast journalism. It's not covered the way it should be, because the mainstream media has crushed their own unions.
Yeah.
By the way, the DNC finally went union. You would think the Democratic National Committee, of all organizations, would be a union shop. They just went union. It's incredible. Very quickly before we wrap it up, it's the dead of August, and I've noticed people are a little lethargic, a little beaten down by the heat. This thing called COVID, which we thought we had beaten, and now it's back, and we know who to blame. It's a dangerous time. We know who to blame for COVID returning. And let me just show you some of the players here. I always like to show Professor K before we go. Just want to show you some of the people out there who have shows.
I've said over and over again that one of the worst mistakes that this country has ever made was to educate women. That a man should never, ever, ever, never, if he want a family, never, ever, but if you just want to have sex, you can marry a woman with educated. But a man should never marry a woman who is educated. She would never, ever, ever make for a good mother and a good wife and a good mother.
Okay, so that's Jesse Lee Peterson or Peters, who and Sam debates him. And now I think
That's a waste of time.
Yeah, why would you?
Sam Seder's a pretty smart guy, but if this is the kind of person he feels the need to debate, shame on him.
There was a time when you need to protect people from themselves. There was a time when this man would be protected from himself and not be given a platform. You know, he needs medication, not his own show. But now everybody, including yours truly, gets to talk, even though maybe they shouldn't be heard. Let me play you Bill Hemmer, the boy wonder. Remember him from CNN? He's now on Fox News. I just like watching Professor Harvey J. K's reaction to this. This is a Fox anchor man.
Critical race theory. It was very good, very informative. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. On the Princeton point here, you and I have discussed it. At the college level, this is fair game. Go ahead and do it, right? I mean, I remember 20 years old going to Trier, Germany, and trying to find the home of Karl Marx because, 1848, he wrote Mein Kampf. I want to know what it was all about. So that's part of the education in America, if you so choose. So,
as I said earlier, to work for Fox News and not know who wrote Mein Kampf, he should be fired immediately.
But what's even scarier to think about? They all have an earbud in their ear, and they're hearing their producers. And what that means is that nobody behind the scenes has said to him, correct yourself.
Right. Well, There are no corrections on TV news. Never.
Yeah.
But the New York Times is loaded with corrections. So why should I trust the New York Times? Every entire page of corrections. Jesse Waters graduates from college, gets a job at Fox News as like an intern or a page, and then just works his way up through Bill O'Reilly to his own show. And people watch him and they think he's a journalist. All he knows is Fox News, and it's so dangerous. Let me show you this Pastor Greg Locke. Alan, you know who Pastor Locke is, right?
Remind me.
You don't remember Pastor Locke? you gave him his start. You said, I remember you said Pacifica needed Father Coughlin. You don't remember this?
Alan gave everybody their starts.
Oh God, yeah.
You said to me, we need a Father Coughlin here at Pacifica. And this was from
Casper Weinberger had a show on Pacifica.
Did he really?
Yeah.
What?
Wow. The defense secretary who was pardoned by George Herbert Walker Bush?
In like the 1960 or so, 60, 61, very far right wing. Pauline Kael had a show, but that's different. Totally, she was a lot.
What crime did she commit other than promoting Woody Allen? So this was from the Pastor Greg Locke show. I believe Alan Minsky was the executive producer of this.
God's about to bring the whole house down, ladies and gentlemen. These bunch of sex trafficking mongrels are about to be exposed. These bunch of pedophiles in Hollywood are going to be exposed for who they are. I don't care what you think about fraudulent Sleepy Joe. He's a sex trafficking, demon-possessed mongrel. He's of the left. He ain't no better than the Pope and Oprah Winfrey and Tom Hanks and the rest of that wicked crowd. God is going to bring the whole house down. I said he's going to bring the whole house down. He's going to burn the whole thing to the ground. He's going to expose all these bunch of pedophiles. I'm telling you, he's going to expose Kamala Harris for the Jezebel demon that she is.
Now, Alan, I believe you gave him a show because he was for Obamacare at the time. And
I remember now, sure. Yeah. Okay.
I'm joking. By the way, you'd be amazed at like things I think people know are jokes. I love watching Professor Harvey J.K. watching that. That's
I mean, what you know what? Sit me down for a whole hour with that, and I will just literally give up.
Well, it's fun. Go ahead, Alan.
Well, okay. You have the segment with the Marxist psychoanalyst and his son, and. One of the fun things.
Freudian, not Marxist. Jesus, you just.
Oh, yeah, right. Sorry. Hitler.
Right. And they also wrote Mein Kampf. I want you to know that.
Right.
Freud wrote Mein Kampf.
That's an interpretation of a dream. So, the Freudians. Right. So who, if you look at Freud's book, either Beyond the Pleasure Principle or around that time, Civilization's Discontents, I think it's in there. No, it's not in that. Just Beyond the Pleasure Principle, and after that, the idea of the Freudian death drive, and it sort of came up.
It's called Thanatos.
But it was popularized at the time of Trump's election, and people said, "Well, the American public and the Trumpsters, and you see a bit possibly with the vaccinations and all, have a death drive, and it extends out to humanity because they're just going to take all of us down." A little bit for what the pastor is saying. Yes, he's right. The world is going to come down. But here's the thing. I saw a very interesting show where if you look closely at Freud, he was always dealing with inversions. And somebody made the argument that it's not the Trumpsters who have the Freudian death drive. It's the neoliberals who have the Freudian death drive. And among other things tied in there is their incredible, voracious appetite for defeat. Okay. For
what?
For defeat. For their own defeat, for their impotence. And
neoliberals.
The neoliberal formation of the Democratic Party when there's the Republican Party. And this was a Freudian critique from the left, arguing that the real matchup for the death drive would be, whatever you want to call them, liberals, moderates, not the left. So the left, again, in its incapacity, going back to what Adnan said, we're in there too, because none of us are doing shit to stop us running off this cliff right now.
Right.
So there you go.
Well, you're executive director of Progressive Democrats of America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who do we have? Well, come on. Now, by the way, folks, I've noticed it is August. We're all a little, there's a summer cold going around. COVID has come back. The news is not, but we've lived through worse than this.
Yeah, look, there's something very good about the big $3.5 trillion infrastructure package. The best thing is it's a break from neoliberalism. And if it does produce a lot of good things for the society, we're not going to forget it anytime soon. And then again, fiscal spending, positive progressive fiscal spending as part of the equation for the economy going forward. And that's an incredible instrument to deploy in a circumstance like the climate emergency. If that's off the table, we're weaker to be able to address that. So even if all this stuff fails in this, because so much of the core components that were supposed to address that were in the bipartisan piece of shit bill, okay? And there are going to be a lot of tax incentives. I know that Adnan was also talking about incentivizing things to make things happen. That is in the 3.5 trillion. And Richie Neal's going to have a version of it for the Ways and Means in the House. That's not quite as good as Ron Wyden's version in the Senate, and which isn't as good as it needs to be, but it is at least close.
Well, so is Dan working for you tonight? Is he back there somewhere?
Dan Frankenberger?
Yeah.
He was attacked by a bee.
Oh, really?
Why do you ask?
Well, I was hoping he could take down something that I was going to, not that I was going to say, but something I was going to ask. If we could predict the amount of money we actually expect to be passed by the.
Oh, that's a good bet by October.
Because I mean, look, I'd love to see 3.5 trillion. What do you think?
Right now, I got to say, at this hour, I do think the Delta variant is the ally of the combined 4.1 trillion, the 600 billion plus the 3.5 all going through.
Thank you.
In other words,
everybody gives her a bad. I call her Delta Dawn. She's not that. She's giving us probably Medicare expansion.
See, the thing right now is the Democrats, they're probably okay as they were in 94 and 2010. And, please quote me publicly and bury me and cancel me and all this. But they're probably okay with losing the 2022 midterms, at least in one house. I mean, they'd probably rather win both. But, they just seem to be doing not enough to really care to try to really win. What I don't think the American political establishment wants, and therefore there'll be an appetite to produce this large bill, I don't think they want a return of Trump. Right. I think that even
and McConnell voting for the bipartisan infrastructure bill was a gigantic FU to Trump.
Right. And the fact that it went forward, because nothing goes forward without McConnell's blessing.
Right.
Well,
you want some good news, and then I'll let you go. This is how you defeat fascism. That there are a lot of things I don't like about the Democratic Party, but it is a ground game in defeating fascism. This is how you defeat I'm being serious here, and it's good news if I can find it. This is how you defeat fascism. You don't defeat fascism on the street. You don't defeat it with a punch or a gun. This is how you defeat fascism in America.
Hi, it's Rudy Giuliani, and I'm on Cameo. If there's an issue of concern that you want to discuss, or a story you'd like to hear or share with me, or a greeting that I can bring to someone that would bring happiness to their day, I would be delighted to do it. It can be arranged, and we can talk through the magic of Cameo. Thank you.
You defeat them in the courts before it even goes to trial. You break them financially. And when I saw Rudy taking to Cameo $350 a pop to say whatever you want, and that's more than he got saying whatever he wanted for Trump, by the way. He was doing that for free. That's how you defeat fascism. That's, PayPal shutting down the Proud Boys. There are ways to do this. Professor K, that makes you happy, doesn't it?
Well, the possibility. I'm just, my sense of 2022 is, in one sense, I say to myself, okay, 2022, can the Democrats squeak by at least to avoid, the return of a Republican House? But then I also think to myself, is Biden up to making it in 2024?
Well,
in which case, who the Democrats put up?
Well, not
that to me is the question.
Not the vice president.
I mean, do you see Biden running again in 2024?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I think if he passes, is it fair to say that if they pass this infrastructure bill, the reconciliation bill, that has Bernie's stamp of approval, Democratic left internecine warfare aside, I think you can run on a woefully short infrastructure bill that doesn't give us Medicare for all. I think he will have put numbers on the board, trillions of dollars on the board that he can run on in 2024.
That presumes, number one, that people actually will experience the consequences of that money sooner rather than later. And right now, if you look at the first bill that went through, I'm still not convinced that Americans will feel it as they will need to feel it to identify with this party.
Are they going to keep the $300 child tax credit? Is that going to be?
Yeah, that would go through to 2025.
Not enough, but it's to be continued. I just want to play. I could, you know what? I want to do a show where I just play clips for Professor Harvey J.K. and get. I don't know why this makes me so happy. Let me find one more.
Better than the IHOP joke from last week.
Yes, I'm not going to apologize for that. Let me see here.
I didn't even get that one for a long time.
I know. Here's how. You know what? This is what's missing. Some good old common sense. This is how you communicate. We need to go back to a time when we just told the American people the truth. And I think that the American people respond to being treated like adults. We infantilize the American people and don't give them enough credit. Let me show you the way it used to be, a simpler time when, straight and honest talk.
Here it comes.
I'm on my way to be a billionaire. Now you can make fun of me, but I don't really care. I have a plan to get there by and by, as long as I stay healthy and I never die. $15 an hour, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, and 32,000 years. I know it's a long time, honey, to 34,020. But when I get there, babe, I'm gonna be in the money. I'm on my way to be a billionaire. Now you can make fun of me, but I don't really care. I have a plan to get there by and by, as long as I stay healthy and I never die. All I really need is a second job or a third. Lift myself up my boots and join that elite herd of the 600 billionaires in the USA who make more in a second than I do in a day. I'm on my way, yes I am. I'm on my way. I'm on my way. Whoa, yes I am. I'm on my way to be a billionaire. Now you can make fun of me, but I don't really care. I have a plan to get there, yes I do, by and by. As long as I stay healthy and I never die. As long as I stay healthy and I never die. As as long as I stay healthy and I never die.
That is Professor Mike Steinel. Unbelievable.
Can you remind me who the actor is sitting in that chair? The billionaire.
I have no idea. It's just somebody.
The face is so familiar.
You hired him for Central. It's stock photo. Before we go, you introduced me to Lindsey Boylan, who ran for Manhattan Borough President.
Yep.
And she was not an easy interview, to say the least. And she.
Well, you were a jackass.
I go back and.
You were a jackass in that interview. Come on.
Well, I'm always a jackass.
You were a jackass, especially with her.
Well,
you were very sweet with Lauren Ashcraft, but something, I don't know what it was.
Oh, go back and listen to the interview.
I can't bear the thought of it.
I know, but you brought her on. I asked her some questions. Listen, I voted for her for Manhattan Borough President. I think, and she single-handedly brought down Andrew Cuomo, and God bless her. And I voted for her for Manhattan Borough President. She was a difficult interview. Maybe I was a jackass. I'll own it. But God bless her. I want to play you a clip, and I mean that I had no idea what she had gone through with Andrew Cuomo, and she wasn't taking any shit from me when I asked her why she was running against Jerry Nadler. I challenge all politicians, but she wasn't taking any shit from me because she wasn't taking any shit from Andrew Cuomo. And that's why I voted for her. This is Tucker Carlson talking about Lindsey Boylan. This is Fox News. Roger Ailes stepped down in 2016 because of sexual assault that cost Fox $40 million. I believe Bill O'Reilly cost upwards of $40 million in sexual harassment. Not sure what constitutes sexual assault. DeGenova, the lawyer there who had a show, was fired because of sexual assault. Fox News is a sexual assault wasteland, right?
Yeah.
Here is Tucker Carlson going after Lindsey Boylan, unable to answer. Somehow he can't answer this question.
That's when a candidate for Manhattan Bureau President, a woman called Lindsey Boylan, wrote a Twitter thread that accused Andrew Cuomo of, quote, harassing her. Sex harassment. The crime, according to Boylan, occurred more than 2 years earlier in 2018, but we hadn't heard about it. So here's the first question. Why did Lindsey Boylan wait 2 years to tell us what had happened? This guy is the governor of one of the most important states in the country. So why didn't she pipe up before the Emmy Awards?
Interesting that somebody from Fox News doesn't understand why a woman, Gretchen Carlson, for example, might have waited before piping up about sexual assault or harassment. It looks like we know that Roger Ailes was guilty of sexual assault. And it looks like Cuomo might be facing criminal charges for sexual assault, right?
Mm-hmm.
People wait. Professor Harvey J. Here's my prediction. October 1st, we're going to be saying, I can't believe it. Biden did it. He did it. He survived that stroke. And he remembers about 22 letters of the alphabet. It's good enough. He's running for, no, I think we're going to have good news. We're going to have Medicare expansion, and it's not good enough, but things get better, folks. I know the climate is, it's bad.
It is bad, period.
Bad. It's going to get better. I promise you. Think of World War II. Think of what my parents had to survive. It's not as bad as 1939. It isn't. Right?
No.
Right?
It isn't as bad only because they had a New Deal. So that New Deal we've lived off of that New Deal for too long.
And the planet, we're gonna fix it. We'll fix it. Professor Marianne Cummings. Oh no, she says carbon capture is a pipe dream. All right, hopefully. Okay, thank you, Alan Minsky, Progressive Democrats of America. Professor Harvey J.K. And this is why it's more entertaining to see some crazy guy screaming and ranting and raving and acting like a wrecking ball. It's more fun, if not edifying.